Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're going to decode the Gospel of Matthew. And we're not just looking at it as a historical biography, but as a meticulously structured architectural masterpiece. It's really fascinating, so let's just dive right in. Here is our blueprint for today. First, the new Moses arrives. Then, the 5 great discourses, followed by redefining the rules, parables and radical community, and we'll wrap up with the final kingdom ethic. Section 1. The new Moses arrives, building for a Jewish audience. Now, it's crucial to remember that Matthew was writing primarily for a first-century Jewish audience. His ultimate goal here? To prove, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that Jesus was the long-awaited, prophesied Messiah. To do this, he uses a very specific and highly effective technique. 12. That's the exact number of times Matthew uses the specific phrase to fulfill what was written. He's directly, repeatedly anchoring Jesus' life right back to ancient Hebrew prophecy. He really wants his audience to know that, hey, this isn't just some new story we're spinning. It is the absolute culmination of an ancient one. And check out this subtle detail he tailored specifically for his readers. Matthew uses the phrase kingdom of heaven 32 times rather than saying kingdom of God. So why do that? Well, it's actually a profound nod to Jewish reverence. He's deliberately avoiding saying the word God directly, showing this deep respect for his audience's traditions, all while introducing them to something entirely new. Okay, moving to section 2, the 5 great discourses, the architectural framework. This really brings us to the core of our explainer. You see, the entire structure of the book is built directly around these specific teachings. Matthew takes Jesus' teachings and organizes them into 5 major pillars: the Sermon on the Mount, the mission of the 12, the parables, the discourse on the church, and the Olivet discourse. This wasn't an accident. It was a highly deliberate architectural choice. Matthew is explicitly echoing the 5 books of the Law of Moses. You know them: Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. This brilliantly illustrates the central theme of Matthew's gospel. He is positioning Jesus as a new Moses. By delivering these 5 massive discourses, Jesus is setting the definitive tone for his entire ministry. He hasn't arrived to just abolish the old law, but to actually fulfill its deepest intent. It's like he's issuing a brand new constitution, one that absolutely does not lower the bar for behavior, but significantly raises it for an entirely new kind of kingdom. That leads us to section 3, redefining the rules, the internal kingdom ethic. We see this internal shift clearest right out of the gate in the first of these massive discourses, the famous Sermon on the Mount. This is where Jesus completely redefines what righteousness even means. He completely shifts the focus away from external religious performance and points it toward an internal kingdom ethic. Think about the old rules. Where the old rules said, do not murder, Jesus steps in and says, actually, you need to deal with your inner anger, basically equating anger to murder of the heart. Instead of just avoiding the physical act of adultery, he demands inner purity, stating that even a lustful look is a violation. And rather than making these elaborate oaths just to prove you're telling the truth, he simply says, just let your yes be yes. At the end of the day, your heart and your absolute baseline integrity are what matter most. And this internal ethic leads to some incredibly radical commands, like love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. Wow, this brilliantly illustrates the whole reversal motif we see running throughout Matthew. I mean, the idea of turning the other cheek and showing indiscriminate generosity, just as God makes the sun rise on the evil and the good, that was absolutely revolutionary in the ancient world. Honestly, it still is today. What's so amazing is just how profoundly practical this is for our modern daily decisions. Think about it. This discourse is a literal remedy for anxiety. Jesus tells his followers, hey, seek kingdom priorities first. He says, look out at the lilies of the field. They aren't out there worrying, and neither should you. Basically, don't borrow tomorrow's anxieties today. Just focus on today's trouble because, let's face it, each day has plenty of its own. It's this beautiful invitation to a radical dependence on God for exactly what you need right here, right now. All right, section 4, parables and radical community, the growth of the kingdom. So shifting from personal ethics, the focus broadens out here to show us how this new kingdom actually operates and grows from the ground up. Rather than just lecturing with a list of abstract facts, Jesus teaches using parables. Now, the Greek word parable literally translates to thrown beside. It's this idea of taking truth and placing it right alongside ordinary life to illuminate it. For instance, he talks about a tiny mustard seed that invisibly grows into this massive reality, or yeast hidden in dough that silently transforms a whopping 60 pounds of flour. The point? The kingdom starts incredibly small, almost invisible, but its growth is absolutely unstoppable. But, as you know, wherever a community grows, conflict is pretty much inevitable. So, in the fourth discourse, which focuses specifically on the church, Jesus tackles conflict resolution head-on. It's sparked by a crucial question from Peter. When we're dealing with conflict, how often should we forgive? Jesus drops this answer 77, or, depending on your translation, 70 times 7. But listen, the exact math isn't the point here at all. He isn't giving them a literal quota to count down. He's giving a command to stop counting entirely. By throwing out that massive number, Jesus establishes limitless, ongoing grace as the absolute baseline standard for his radical community. This brings us to section 5, the final kingdom ethic, escalating stakes. We've reached the fifth and final pillar, the Olivet Discourse. And this leads right into the agonizing final week of Jesus' life, where the stakes, well, they escalate dramatically. As we trace this timeline toward the cross, we see Jesus actively, literally living out his own teachings. Think about the progression. On Sunday, he enters Jerusalem as a humble king riding on a donkey. On Monday, he's cleansing the temple, actively driving out corruption. Then, by Thursday, he's establishing an entirely new covenant at the Last Supper. And later that very night in Gethsemane, he chooses total, agonizing surrender to the Father's will, saying, "Not my will, but yours." He chooses peaceful surrender over violence. He even tells his own disciples to put away their swords right when they're being attacked. Through his death and subsequent resurrection, he completely solidifies the ultimate reversal of societal norms. In this architectural masterpiece of a gospel, Matthew shows us that greatness has absolutely nothing to do with power, authority, or wealth. The kingdom consistently, relentlessly inverts human hierarchies. If you want to be the greatest, you must be the servant of all. I mean, Jesus himself explicitly said he came not to be served, but to serve others, and ultimately to give his life as a ransom. Which brings us to his final teachings on judgment, specifically the famous parable of the sheep and the goats. Here, Jesus pulls back the curtain and reveals that the ultimate metric for entering the kingdom isn't your bank account, your perfectly tuned intellectual doctrine, or your fancy religious titles. It's action. The final criterion boils down to specifically how we treat the vulnerable among us. Are we feeding the hungry, welcoming the stranger, visiting the imprisoned? Because as he says, whatever you do for the least of these, you're actually doing directly for him. So as we wrap up this explainer, the meticulously crafted blueprint of Matthew's gospel leaves us with one incredibly provocative, intensely practical daily question. How are you treating the least of these today?